Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked you to rate or grade Han Solo. We'll then be comparing those results to all the other characters we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. And of course, if you'd like, you can already head down to the comments below and nominate or vote for which character we'll do next. Just respond to my pinned comment down there with a name or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already there. Whichever comment gets the single most votes in roughly the next 24 hours will be the winner. Okay, so let's now get to the results of the poll for Han here, where we'll see that 64% of people thought he was an A tier character, 28% thought he was a B, 6% said C, which then left 1% to say D, and a final 1% that gave Han Solo an F. And so when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, Han Solo ends up with an average score of 4.53, which puts him into 7th place overall out of the 14 characters we've done thus far, and 100th of a point behind Luke Skywalker, which is maybe a little lower than I saw him finishing. I don't know, we'll likely get more into that when we get to the comments. And speaking of those, let's get to them now. But before we do, let me just quickly once again say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches. It's all greatly appreciated, not to mention it's interesting to see how all these characters will score, what you'll have to say about them, and what our list is shaping up to look like. Okay, so let's then start as we always do with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Jacob Sedlak, who said, "Harrison Ford may have hated the role, but we all died a little inside when The Force Awakens killed him." And I do pretty much agree with that. I think one of the biggest problems with Han's death in The Force Awakens is not only was it telegraphed in the actual movie, I mean, nothing good ever comes from meeting your angry dark side son in the middle of a railingless bridge that spans a seemingly endless expanse, but I think we all thought going into that movie that there was a really good chance he was going to die, mainly because Harrison Ford was not going to do multiple movies, even though he did come back for a brief scene in the 9th movie, or the 3rd movie of this trilogy. Anyway, as Jacob points out here, Ford hated the role, or should I say he was afraid of being typecast because of the role, and he wanted Han to die in Return of the Jedi, mostly because he didn't think there was anything left to tell in the story of Han Solo, and he never wanted to be asked back to play the character again. And I think in hindsight, or after the sequels, some may have wished that he had died in Return of the Jedi. Alright, next up then we have this comment from Nick Al-Fidi, who said, "In A, I don't give many characters an A, as I like to give each grade quite a bit of thought, but Han's arc from being a selfish scoundrel to a friend and well-respected leader is quite poetic. He may not be the most morally pure person in the world, but his flaws make him relatable, someone that the audience can identify with when we were at a certain part of our lives, someone I think that the sequel trilogy was sorely lacking, although the individual concepts for the sequel trilogy characters I loved." I mean, Han's arc in the original trilogy is fantastic and nearly perfectly executed. Going along with what I said on that last comment, maybe we could debate and discuss whether or not he should have died in Return of the Jedi by committing some sort of great final selfless act. Maybe somehow he has to give his life to blow up the shield generator. And I know staying behind to trigger the detonator because the remote somehow doesn't work or broke is the oldest trick in the book, so I'm not suggesting that. Or maybe he could die somehow saving Leia. Again, I think it's an interesting topic now that we see what was done with him in the sequels, and it certainly doesn't mean he and Leia couldn't have still had a child. I also do agree the sequels could have probably used a Han Solo type character, or someone a little more morally ambiguous outside of DJ in The Last Jedi, who felt pretty much pointless, to me at least. I still remember how many people thought or hoped that DJ would stand for Dark Jedi or something else maybe interesting. Anyway, going into the trilogy, I kind of thought Poe was going to be that type of Han character, but he really wasn't. He was someone all for the cause from the very start, so much for the cause that he started a mutiny in The Last Jedi. Then in The Rise of Skywalker, they kind of implied he had a shady past with the whole Zori Bliss spice runner thing, but by then in the last movie, it was just too late. It just feels like it was tacked on information so that they can do more with the character in the other sources of canon, and indeed there is a young adult book coming out about Poe's time as a spice runner with Zori Bliss. Okay, moving on now, we have this comment from Leo Van Horn, who said, "Honestly surprised this isn't higher. Han is my favorite character of the OT besides Vader." We also had this one from Liam Kibby, who said, A, he's just so cool. Every kid wanted to be like Han when the originals first came out. And if I could somehow do a poll asking who is the coolest character in all of Star Wars, I think Han wins that pretty easily. And no, certainly not everybody loves him or thinks he's the greatest. The poll results kind of tell us that. But for a lot of people, I think there's just something about the character that pulls you instantly to him and makes you like the guy or want to be like him. And his introduction in A New Hope is one of the best, if not the absolute best, character introductions you'll ever see anywhere. From the negotiations with Obi-Wan, to the confrontation with Greedo where he used to shoot first, to coolly and calmly flipping a coin to the bartender and apologizing for the mess. Not only do you learn everything you need to know about the character right here and now, but despite yourself, almost because this is a shady guy, you instantly start to like him. And that's because there's just something about him or the way Harrison Ford plays him that makes so many people wish they were him or could be like him. Again, Han and/or Harrison's charisma is just incredible. It's uncanny, really, and it's hard to imagine anyone else trying to play Han Solo, which brings us to this comment from Terry Crews, who said, I know, Harrison Ford is great as Han Solo. He is so great that I will not let the Solo movie drag down my opinion of the character. I grew up wanting to be strong with the Force like Luke, but what I really wanted was to be cool as Han. A- for me. We also had this comment from Michael Pal Mir, who said, hottest of the hot takes. Solo was the best of the Disney Star Wars movies. Okay, so as I've said before, I enjoyed Solo. I don't know that it's the best Disney Star Wars movie. I give the nod to Rogue One in that department, but I enjoyed it, and if you hate it, that's absolutely fine. Go ahead and rip it to shreds if you want. We're all entitled to our opinions and to express them. And even though I liked it, it certainly wasn't the greatest movie ever. It's got its problems, mainly because, as I've said before, the movie feels like a checklist of every major or important thing that's ever happened in Han's life, and most of them seem to happen in this very small window of time. I mean, meet Chewbacca, check. Meet Lando, check. Kessel Run, check. Win the Falcon from Lando, check. Attain the famous Steel 44 blaster, check. Shoot someone first, check. And though it's kind of cool to see all these things, again, I do like the movie. His introduction in A New Hope is so great that I don't know that we needed to see any of it. Han's story could have forever began in a cantina on Tatooine with that incredible introduction, and I don't think anyone would have ever had an issue with that. Okay, next up here we have this comment from Sebastian Carvajal, who said, a scene that really gets to me is when Han is leaving the Echo base with Leia, Chewie, and 3PO, and suddenly a door closes and 3PO gets left behind. Typical, he says. I didn't grow up with the OT, but when I first watched Empire, they had me thinking for a second that he was going to get left behind. Then the door opens, come on, says Han while pulling 3PO by the arm. That simple scene, which is mostly played for a bit of a comedic moment, really warmed me up to Han, and I believe it partially encapsulates his character. Great comment here. I never really thought much about that little scene or moment until reading this comment, but I think you're right, it does sort of encapsulate who Han is. He tries not to care or pretends not to care, and if you don't know the movie or it's the first time watching Empire Strikes Back, and you're unsure about Han still, you wouldn't be surprised if he had left 3PO behind. Seems like something this guy would do, only it isn't, because he doesn't go back just because, well, likely Leia would have been angry at him for leaving 3PO behind. He does it because that's actually the type of person he is. He's not someone that will leave you behind or who only thinks of himself, though maybe he'd like to be that type of person, or maybe he used to be that person, but he's definitely changed by The Empire Strikes Back. Alright, and next up here we have this comment from Jody Amos, who said, like a lot of the OT characters, I'm going to ignore the sequels and give him an A. He's a great iteration of the reluctant hero type, with a fairly simple but remarkably well-executed character arc. He starts as a scoundrel concerned solely with getting paid, and you get to watch him grow into not only a good friend, but also a leader. He's heroic, but still human. His love story with Leia is one of the most entertaining fictional romances ever, and I like how it's used to progress both characters. Plus, he's just so quotable. We're all fine here. How are you? Next then we have this comment from Nick P, who said, Han Solo is a high B for me. The reason we love Han Solo so much, I think, is in large part because of Harrison Ford's performance. His charisma oozes off the screen. You can't help but love that scoundrel. A New Hope gives him the arc wherein he has to learn to be selfless and fight for a greater cause and not act exclusively in self-interest. Then Empire rolls around and he has to go through deeper character growth, evolving to be a better person for the woman he loves. Return of the Jedi on, his character kinda stagnates. He's that confident walking personification of machismo. I think there was a great potential with him in the sequels, however, the choices made prevented him from going further than it could have. His tragic relationship with Ben was really compelling up until he and the arc were both cut short. He's captain of the Millennium Falcon and has some of the most iconic lines, but when you get to the nitty-gritty, he's just Han, which is more than enough. Okay, and probably to no one's surprise here, there were a lot of comments about how Han was handled in the sequel trilogy, and mainly The Force Awakens, with many saying or leaving broad or general statements like it was horrible and destroyed the character, and others saying Han was the highlight of the movie for them. And I think the discrepancy here is in what exactly people are looking at. Because I think when people say he was a highlight, they mean Harrison Ford's portrayal of Han, that they thought it was great to have him back or to see him again on the big screen, whereas those who say it was horrible are referring to the regression done to the character, that he was back to his old smuggling ways, and that his relationship with Leia hadn't worked out. Which kind of leads us to this comment from BatLantern721 who said, "Hey, we just need to take out his character regression JJ gave him for nostalgia." And sadly, I don't know that the character was regressed for nostalgia's sake, because when we look at the structure of the movie, it seems to be done as an easy excuse for them to have to go to and include in the film Maz Kanata, and to some degree to make for the Leia-Han reunion to be dramatic. Because if Han and Leia are still happily together, when Han encounters Finn, Rey, and BB-8, and BB-8 of course has the map to Luke, there would be nothing stopping him from just immediately contacting Leia, which means no real need to go to Takodana and bring Maz Kanata into the story. Because most likely, if the Falcon is being tracked, Han just contacts Leia and she sends someone to meet them if she doesn't go herself, and they meet somewhere and they get BB-8 into the hands of the Resistance, the end. But if Han wants to avoid Leia, he has to make up or go with the excuse about the ship needing to be clean or getting BB-8 on a clean ship, which means going to Takodana, which means there needs to be something between Han and Leia so that they don't just go straight to her. In other words, as I see it, Han and Leia were split up in large part so we could get Maz Kanata. Okay, and now let's get to just a few final comments, starting with this one from Jesse Steiner, who said, "The line where he responds back, 'I know,' to the line, 'I love you,' is one of my personal favorites. I use it with my wife from time to time. It's one of so many reusable quotes from the Star Wars series. Easy A for me." Next, then, we have this comment from Catherine Winyala, who said, "One of my favorite and without a doubt one of the best characters in Star Wars, hands down. However, while I vote A for him as a character, I'd vote D for him as a smuggler. If you're a famous smuggler, you aren't doing it right," to quote Davos Seaworth. Then we have this one from Mimiest, who said, "To be honest, surprisingly, I have no strong feelings on him. I know he's one of the most beloved movie characters of all time, but he's just there for me, so I couldn't even give him a rating." We also have this comment from Nicholas Aguirre, or the song lyrics I should say, and no, I'm not going to sing them or read them, but do feel free to do that at home yourself. Then this one from Johnny Delabasic, who said, "Hey, it's me. This line makes me smile every time, an easy A." Also this one from Derpimus Maximus, who said, "I think my favorite Han moment is in Return of the Jedi, when the 'I love you, I know' exchange from Empire Strikes Back gets flipped around on him." And finally, hear this comment from Davis Parks, who said, "How did Darth Vader have over 90% of people vote A, while Han gets a measly 60%? Han is the most interesting character in the original trilogy. His development in Empire led to 3 of my favorite moments in the whole series." And as I said at the start, I was a little surprised that Han didn't end up with a bit of a higher score. I absolutely think there are many people out there who would consider him their favorite character of all time, and many more that think he's one of the best or has one of the best stories in all of Star Wars. And though many people seem to instantly connect with him or want to be him, there were plenty of comments this week from people who just didn't see the appeal or didn't get it, which is certainly fine. There were of course others who said they lowered his grade from an A to a B or B to a C because of the sequels or because of maybe the movie Solo, and so that of course obviously hurt him as well. And when it comes to Darth Vader, as many commented on the poll for him, well, he doesn't really have a bad movie or a really bad scene or moment, outside of maybe his nose scream at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And that's a strong reason why I'm not sure any character will ever be able to dethrone Darth Vader. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Han Solo, or what I or anyone else had to say about him here in this video. Or feel free to nominate or vote for which character we do next. Either way, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.